Hey y'all, this is Ben. We're continuing to work on the Twin Peaks Unwrapped book, and I want to just thank everyone who's been supporting us by pre-ordering the book at bluerosemag.com. I want to give you an update on how the book sales have been going, and we're 1/4 of the way to 200 pre-orders. Once we hit 200, we are going to release a special podcast for all those who pre-ordered that will include a sample of Kyle MacLachlan interview and other cast and crew interviews we've done for the book. Thank you again to everyone who's supported us. It means so much.
Harry, remember that ad with a picture of Ronette Pulaski?
My mom's a writer. She was really good. Poems and short stories. She's an alcoholic.
Shut your eyes and you'll burst into flames.
Let's talk about Laura.
Okay, let's talk about Laura.
Give me a beer, Shelley.
Honey, what happened? Are you okay?
Just give me a damn beer!
Oh, you're not gonna hurt me again. Don't touch me. Don't come near me, Leo. Don't make me leave.
And there's always music in the air.
All right, this is Twin Peaks Rewatch, episode 5, and we are lucky to have the 25 years later team. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hey.
So we have on...
I'm Rob King, and what I do is I'm the managing editor of Twin Peaks material currently.
Hi, Steve Wandling, also part of the 25YL crew. I am a staff writer and the assistant horror editor.
Hey, Andrew Grevas, the janitor for 25 years later here. Clean up their desks at night, and I see a lot of interesting things in wastebaskets.
Does a wonderful job.
Hi, it's JC Hotchkiss. I am managing news editor for 25 Years Later site and trying to write a whole bunch of things.
And the unseen players.
Hi, I'm MinxArcana as Josie Packard.
Hi, I'm Schaefer the Dark Lord as James Hurley, Big Ed Hurley, Deputy Andy Brennan, Sheriff Harry S. Truman, Special Agent Dale Cooper, Doc Hayward, Major Garland Briggs, Einar Thorson, and Pete Martell.
I'm Francine the Lucid Dream, and I approve this message. And we are
the Pink Room Burlesque.
So this is episode 5. How I explain episode 5 is it's kind of the Log Lady's Cabin episode. What is your impressions of episode 5?
It was a filler episode because it was kind of, they kind of went all over the place. It had your Benjamin and your Jerry, and it had Leland coming back. It really hammered home the Leo aspect. I think this episode, they were definitely kind of putting that out there.
And I would agree with that. You finally see red curtains connected with the real world. You're finally seeing Leo's truck identified with the magazine there. So I thought this was a rather important episode. And then, like you said, you all said the Log Lady's Cabin. She says some fairly important things I guess we'll get to.
Yeah, I just thought that overall the episode, as you're saying, a good pilot is supposed to kind of wow us and draw us in, and then you get a few episodes to put all the players on the board, so to speak. And I thought this episode did that really well in terms of covering a lot of ground. I thought it kind of set all the players, as you're talking, seeing curtains for the first time, or a visit to the Log Lady's Cabin, and there's just a lot that this kind of covers. So I think that this is one of those episodes that sets up the season really nicely.
Totally.
That's true.
And we start off with Cooper being woken up in his bed. Is it the Icelanders? I think
it's the Icelandic, yeah.
Yeah.
Where they're singing at the top of their lungs.
Usually the Great Northern is a wonderful place.
It's always busy, though. They're trying to woo all these people. I know,
but usually they're very polite, and he loved the accommodations, and now he's upset. And I think, doesn't he talk about how he's got to send over his earplugs?
He talks to Diane, a.k.a. Amazon, and to send over some earplugs.
I think he got it less than 2 days, though.
He must have Diane Prime.
Isn't this the episode where he comes in and he says, "I only have time for coffee"? He says, I'm tired and I'm and I only have time for coffee.
Right. He doesn't have the time for chit chat with Audrey there.
Yeah, I know.
Right.
You should always have time for Audrey.
So, Brian, would you be interested in writing that Diana's Amazon theory for me?
It is something I've been saying since I started watching the show. At first, I thought Diane wasn't a real person, but I'm like, how the heck does Diane get him stuff so quickly? Like,
he's not a real person.
He gets the earplugs like the next day. He's like, I think.
Look, Laura Dern. What are we talking about? This is Laura Dern. She can do anything.
Diane Prime.
Lindsay and I still go back and forth on that. Lindsay and I, to this day, we'll have a conversation. We said we still, regardless if we saw Laura Dern play her in season 3. We still believe she's like a figment.
Yeah, I like that theory.
Nail polish and everything else, the red and the white, and the way she dresses like the color of the recorder.
Right? Yeah, she does.
like that.
Yeah, but
yeah.
yeah. And the missing pieces, Cooper is talking to a Diane.
That's a weird Cooper.
I agree. That's a
That
really
is not a
strange-
real Cooper.
Right.
Yeah.
He's doing.
He's stretching in front of her, like he's trying to like impress her.
Right.
But in the book, they went on a date. And they implied they had duck, and they implied they had coitus afterwards.
Something.
True.
Oh.
You know, that's always a great date. Duck and coitus.
I guess the next scene we have Ben and Jerry.
Ben and Jerry talking about foods. Jerry's
Always.
got like this gigantic
lamb.
Yeah, from this wonderful woman he met.
That's right, the Icelandic lamb. Yeah, that's right.
Right.
Yes.
Goes from food to pot in like 2 seasons.
Maybe he was always on pot.
Right.
Well,
He
always had the whole time. He needed to feed it.
I was just thinking about the one thing that maybe pointed to Mr. Palmer, Leland, having a frat. When you look at it before you know he's the killer, he's grieving. But when I looked at it, again, subsequently, you can't help but think, oh, there's a little bit of a sign that something's a little more off in this man than grieving.
It's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
The Cooper scene in the beginning, something that I really found interesting about that was Cooper agitated. So far, we've had Cooper on this pedestal as this character who derives from his subconscious, and his personality is so quirky, and he really gets humanized here in this first scene when he's angry about lack of sleep. It's one of the first times, and we will have more over the course of the series, where he seems a little bit more like you and I than some mythological detective, which he's certainly been portrayed to be over the course of the first 4 episodes.
Yeah,
Yeah, I agree with that.
Great thought.
Rob?
Yeah, so I'll go back to Jerry with this leg of lamb by the lovely Hepa. And with this is, I got to thinking, as I was just rewatching it last night, and I saw that scene, and I said, well, you know what? What does lamb represent? Like gentleness, like innocence? And here it is wrapped in plastic.
Oh.
And this disturbs Ben when he sets it. Of course, it's just gross to have that food on your desk. But I thought perhaps maybe this is kind of a more subtle hint that kind of casting some shade on Jerry. You know, he's in love with this innocence wrapped in plastic kind of idea.
I like that a lot.
I do too. I never even noticed that.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. The innocent slaughtered and then brought to be devoured by this rich. It also could be almost like a red herring thrown at Ben too. That the fact that they Jerry throws this plastic wrapped innocent creature on his desk.
Ben was definitely being pointed at a few times. The German title for this is Cooper's Dreams. Oh, with an S. Dreams. Cooper's Dreams. And there's no Cooper dream in this whole episode. I mean, I guess we could talk about the red curtain that's from his dream, but it's a weird title. And if anything, he didn't get to dream because he got woken up.
Right.
But so much of his dream was realized in the log lady's cabin, which is really what makes this one of my favorite episodes of the first season. It is a build-up episode towards the finale, and a lot of things are being put in place. From a traditional television standpoint, all gears are headed towards the finale here, but we do get to see those things that make Cooper so quirky show up in the real world, like it was discussed earlier. And the log lady's cabin is certainly one of my favorite scenes in the entire first season, if not entire series.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And
I agree. I love that scene.
And this episode was written by Mark Frost, and it's funny, especially when we get to that cabin part, there's dialogue there that you'd swear was David Lynch or something. It's just so quirky and so strange that, if you didn't know better, you would just assume that David Lynch wrote that.
But Mark didn't he? He wrote the whole episode, if I'm not mistaken.
Right, yeah.
But the feel of the show has been established, so he knows. He knows how these characters should speak.
Sheriff's department go to, I believe, Jacques. They're at Jacques' apartment.
And they find the magazine.
Yeah.
Stuck to the ceiling?
Is in the lamp, I think.
In the lamp?
Or in the light
fixture. Hidden.
In a light fixture, isn't it?
Fixture,
Cooper gets up and then gets it down.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right.
As he's chewing on a donut, and tries to shove the whole thing in his mouth.
And we see the guy dressed up.
Georgia Peach?
Georgia Peach.
Yeah, that's right.
A man with a beard and a blue dress.
Yeah.
And then where the next scene is
Bobby and
Shelley there hanging out.
I mean, he's basically saying, "I'm a big guy. I'm gonna shoot Leo. Leo's dead."
Somebody answers the door. He's like, "Yeah, I gotta go."
Yeah, he's like, "I gotta get out of here." Whoop whoop. Rob, what do you got to say?
Yeah, so in David Bushman and Arthur Smith's book, Twin Peaks FAQ, he points out an interesting thing. He says that Frost obviously knew his Chekhov, and what he's talking about is that in school you always learn about foreshadowing, and it's always the gun in the drawer or the idol that sets up the suspense, and that's what Mark Frost is doing here with Bobby playing with Shelley's gun, and we know that we're leading up to some ominous thing happening with this gun toward the end.
Good point.
Very good. What's that old saying? If you introduce a gun in the first act, by the end of the third act, it needs to have gone off or something like that.
Unless it's season 3.
I was just going to say that. So, this should irritate me, but it does. The whole Cooper's in the hospital. He gets Bushman's gun. He's like, "Oh, give me the gun that you have on you." He never uses the gun at all. Like, what was the point? I don't know if it's just like, "Oh, no, I truly am the FBI because I have my gun with me."
But then he does use the gun at Judy's.
Oh.
Yes, he does.
He does.
Oh, I was wrong.
Yeah.
I forgot about that.
I know, because it happens so much later on.
It was like another
And then
world.
he has fried gun for lunch.
All right, then I've been wrong this whole time.
No, I thought the same
forgot
thing.
about that. All right, why don't we do a unseen scene?
An unseen scene.
Gas farm garage. Day. Big Ed Hurley and James Hurley are working together on an engine. James is wrestling with some emotional demon. Ed takes notice.
Mom came home yesterday.
Ed nods.
She in bad shape? It's getting worse. Every time she goes off on a drunk now, I half expect her to turn up dead. And part of me's thinking there's worse things that could happen.
Those are hard thoughts.
James almost overcome with emotion.
God, I'm so ashamed of her.
That doesn't mean we give up. We have to keep trying.
What's left to do? Talk about it some more? She won't get help. She won't listen to either one of us.
I don't know what else we can do.
She's killing herself. I don't want to hate her, Ed, but if she won't let us help her, sometimes I think it'd be better if she'd just get it over with.
His tears finally come. Ed hugs him.
I know it's rough, but if we give up on her, who else is gonna give a damn?
Car pulls up out front. We hear it trip the bell wires near the pumps. Pulling away, trying to make light.
It's been kind of a rough week.
He goes out to the back. We hear a car door open and close. Norma comes into the shop. Too many secrets to rush into each other's arms.
Hey, good looking.
I love Schaefer. My gosh.
It's a little crazy that he does all of the male voices.
All the guys' voices, yeah.
He's so good.
I should mention that both Rob and JC, you guys were on the last Community Rewatch show, which thank you for your great performances that you two did.
You're welcome.
In those, there was the whole Colleen Hurley.
Well, there is. James has the moment with his mother where he talks to her and stuff. So I'm kind of glad they didn't go into detail with this story. I got to be honest.
The thing is, they tried so hard because I think they might actually filmed it twice. I think they did it in season 1, and then they came back in season 2, and they tried to do it again, and each time it was cut. But you're right, it didn't. So since they cut that from the last episode, there's no way. I mean, maybe they felt like, oh, it's not. Why even mention it? Because we didn't see his mom.
Getting it in this episode.
The only thing that I could think of when I reading it to do the the narration for 4 and now with 5 reading it again and listening was the fact that they wanted to have some sort of like side by side with the way why he felt the way he did about Laura, because he thought he could save her too. So if they set it up that he really wanted to help his mother but he couldn't get to her, it was almost like he wanted to do that for Laura and didn't succeed in that. Do you know what I'm saying?
True.
Totally.
That's the only thing I could think of that would why they would have had that storyline kind of go.
And they were still pushing it. Later on in this episode, he still does run into Donna at the gazebo, and he's still saying about, oh, my mom, she's a drunk and this and that. So they still they really did want to have it in there, but I don't know.
That was fine with me.
Yeah.
That's all you need.
Yeah.
Yeah, they really established it in that one scene. And as I watched it, having read this, I said they did just fine establishing that. I remember that about the storyline, and I didn't need the extra, although I could probably always use more Big Ed in scenes.
Yes.
And then Audrey goes to Horns for her job and convincing
Emery Battis, right?
Yes.
Is that it?
He folds like a stack of chairs.
Well, she said she's gonna say you made a pass at me if you don't give me the
And
job.
tell my father, and like basically he's like, okay, whatever you want to do, I'll give you the job. You're hired. Who directed this?
It was Leslie Linka Glatter.
Oh.
Yeah. And then we go to the Double R, and we've got the James, Donna, and
Maddie.
They're all
The
hanging.
Cherry Coke debacle.
The what?
The Coke debacle. What happens to the Coke?
There was a whole thing on Twitter about how James buys her a Cherry Coke, and she never takes a sip out of it, and she just leaves it. And then just gets up and agrees that she'll go find the diary and gets up. And it was like a whole funny threads for months about Cherry Coke and how she disrespected the Cherry Coke.
Maybe his hands were too close to the top of the drink. He's like, I'm not drinking out of that.
No, we got Bobby in therapy with Dr. Jacoby. And this is where we find out that Laura told Dr. Jacoby that when he and Laura had sex, he cried afterwards.
Right.
So Jacoby's throwing that in his face.
The Bobby scene, that's also one of my favorites. I know somebody else had said the same thing, and I wanted to echo that statement. Yeah. Bobby had been portrayed as such a bad boy, as such a villain over the course of the 4 episodes in the pilot that we've seen thus far. And this is the first time that we really got to see Bobby as more than just the villainous type. You know, he'd been flirty with Shelley, but he'd always been that bad kid, the one that you knew was potentially going to get into trouble. And this scene here with Jacoby just broke him down. And we got to see what was going on with him. We got to see what he suffered from. And in a lot of ways, he became a little bit more parallel to James. We viewed them as opposites this whole time. They're rivals.
Right.
But now we get to see what makes both of them tick. What's the drive for both of these characters' infatuation with Laura? You know, James has the savior complex when you compare, like, because I think JC was spot on with her interpretation about James's mother earlier. And with Bobby, it's this deep-rooted, I want to please Laura Palmer. And here in this scene with Jacoby, it just becomes crystal clear. It's like, this is why he loved this girl. She broke him down in a way to where he was almost enslaved to her charm. And I love it. It's a very powerful scene.
Right. So I would second that emotion, that you really see him change. And I know John Byrne talks about it in Wrapped in Plastic. This is the episode where we begin to see more nuance with some of the characters. And so part of that, when we kind of signed on here, I was thinking about that scene. And I thought, is this now, at the beginning, it becomes a family therapy session. Is this the Briggs we saw from the pilot, or is this when we begin to see all of the characters becoming nuanced, is from this therapy session?
Interesting. I like that.
Well, really, we see the Bobby that we read about in the diary.
Yes.
Because the Bobby in the diary is that Bobby that breaks down. It's the one that, he really, I think initially loved her and, fell into her charms, like Andrew said, and then but really got torn apart because she was fighting her demons and kind of gave in to Bobby. And then Bobby was wanting to please her, was like, okay, I'll do this for her. And that's where you get the Bobby at the beginning, in the pilot and then leading up to the scene. So you didn't really know it, but if you read the diary, that's the Bobby we get when, when Dr. Jacoby breaks him down.
I agree. Definitely. And that being released, you have that soaring music, and then you go into outside, and that leads us to the cabin.
The cabin.
Yay.
And I really love the idea of the men in the woods.
Bookhouse Boys.
The Bookhouse Boys. I do say on each one of these shows about, like, is there anything that, after watching season 3, do I think about now with this show? But I do always think about the whole Jack Rabbit's palace. Oh, there was the men in the woods, and they were on a mission. And I don't know, this kind of reminds me of that same kind of feel to it.
Reminiscent.
Yeah.
They're really looking for Jacques' cabin, and I think once they just bump into, they don't even know it's Log Lady's cabin.
No,
like,
Hawk knows that the Log Lady's cabin's there because she alludes to the fact that I haven't seen you in a while, or something. I thought she says to Hawk.
Yeah, did she say, like, you're a few days late? Like, you
Yeah,
should have been here
or
by
something.
now. There were so many episodes leading up to, like, what does the log have to say about all this? And I really thought this was something that was going to happen for the whole series. Like, I thought it was always going to be like, will Cooper talk to the log this time? We actually do find out there's no more mystery to it. It's we learn what the log knew.
Right.
Doesn't she say something about catching fire?
Yes.
Bursting into flame, something like that. I can't remember the line.
I should know the line. That's to me is the David Lynch line. It's like, close your eyes and you'll burst into flames.
It just reminds me of Fire Walk with Me is just my favorite, one of my favorite films. That reminds me of that scene with
Laura and Donna.
Yeah.
Oh, when you're falling.
Right.
Yeah, when
faster
you're
and
falling,
faster.
Yeah. And just the title in general,
Totally.
That whole. Yeah.
Right. So she's talking about the fire, and this is when we begin again to get some understanding about what Fire Walk with Me means. So I think the line she says is, "Fire is like the devil hiding like a coward in the smoke."
Yes.
And in that reporting of the log, we find out that there were 3 men and 2 women laughing in horror. This is the first time until we get to the premiere of the second season, and then later in Fire Walk with Me, that we're getting our first clues of what's happening at the end of Laura's life directly from the log. Fire Walk with Me tied to it.
And it's Mark Frost. This is Mark Frost doing. Like, we put so much emphasis, I do at least, on David Lynch and fire, and it's all him. But
we've learned in an interview that the Bookhouse Boys and the Owls and all that stuff was Mark Frost.
Yeah, isn't that something? That,
and it wasn't David Lynch at all.
I'm falling more and more in love with this episode the further that we go along. I even rewatched it, but something about talking to you guys is bringing that out in me. And I alluded to humanizing Cooper earlier, and then I talked about Bobby and James and how much stronger I felt about them as characters. And it's the same with the log lady. She had been teased as, ooh, is she important? Or we didn't think she was comedy, but we didn't know how important she was prior to this episode. And it really gives you an idea of how well mapped out this entire series was when you look at what happens here in episode 5 and then compare it to, like, as Rob mentioned and Steve also, the season 2 premiere and Fire Walk with Me. Everything aligns so perfectly. The blueprint prior to this show starting was solid. And we can look back on an episode like this and just see exactly how genius it was, their pre-planning prior to production.
Yeah.
Very true.
Absolutely.
I agree. I love the scene because they really did. Yeah, they put the log lady in a kind of seer kind of role, but like just even like her little mannerisms. Like I love when Cooper goes to grab the cookie and she slaps his hand and says, "Wait for the tea."
Yes.
And if you use that like with today's terminology, it's like, wait till I tell you something first. Like wait for the tea. So it just kind of made me laugh when I rewatched it because I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm like that really. She was trying to pace them, you know what I mean? It's like, it's just very, this whole scene with the way she interacts with everybody and tells them things. And you could see the relationship between her and Hawk. Hawk was very at ease. If you watch his whole mannerisms through the entire tea and cookie scene.
Yeah.
He's very much relaxed around her. So I do think that that's the season 3, the relationships, people were kind of like, oh, I didn't realize Hawk was so close. Yeah, you did. Because if you watch certain things with him and the log lady, there was a closeness there.
Oh, yeah, I agree. Totally agree. I always felt there was a connection between them. I think they went deeper, and it makes sense that it's stronger, 25 years later. So I agree.
Totally.
Yeah, that's a great point. And Hawk says the wood holds many spirits, doesn't it, Margaret? And he does. You're right. He has. I didn't even see that connection until you're saying that. But yeah.
Yeah.
The Hawk log lady relationship actually reminds me a lot of my relationship with Rob, where I call him frequently and say cryptic things over the phone.
So are you Hawk and Rob is the log lady in this scenario?
No, I'm the log lady and he's Hawk.
All right.
That's what I thought. I was going to say, I think I could just see Andrew as the log lady very easily. Not that Rob, you wouldn't, I just see Rob as the Hawk in this scenario. Sorry, Rob, if you wanted to be the log lady.
I'm here. Yeah.
I mean, we also learn about her husband died in a fire.
Which I want to talk about real quick. We learn about her husband, and Ben and myself had the pleasure of speaking to Catherine Coulson before her passing. And we asked her about the log, And I wish a part of me we didn't, but I'm glad we did because we have that forever. We asked her, we thought the log was like her husband, like the spirit of her husband lived on in that log, or that was a way of her coping with her husband's death because it was a gift. And she just said, nope, that's not how I perceived it. She perceived it as it was just a log and had nothing to do with her husband. I don't like that.
I don't like it. Yeah, I mean, this is one of the few times where I'm kind of like, well, thank you for sharing, but I'm going to say it is because there's so... Yeah, but it's interesting.
Well, it could have been a totem. You know, like, it's not actually her husband.
Exactly what you're saying, JC. I thought the same thing. Like, but she was just saying it had no, like, the way she perceived it, it was not her husband, had nothing to do with him at all. It was just a log.
Okay, tell Mark Frost about that and then the secret history of Twin Peaks, and then you get back.
We should probably just keep a note here for one of the upcoming kind of deleted scenes because I want to talk about Mark Frost, and I want to say that's how she saw it. But no thanks to Mark Frost with what he wrote later, considering that he wrote this. And so I want to come back to that point here in a second. About our interpretations of her husband and what happened.
I also, like, the actors, I always look at it one way. The actors they usually are they keep it secret about how they perceive something anyway. So it's just interesting to hear her perception of it. But I think ultimately, as the Twin Peaks community and Mark Frost, we've seen it that way, which I think we all universally agree that it had something to do with her husband.
Yeah, or either where they got married because they got married up in the woods and it was a piece of the wedding because she didn't, you know what I mean? And
Right.
Yeah.
It's sentimental, I guess.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I guess I was thinking of stepping back and do another kind of deleted or unseen scene. And this actually took place before they went into the woods.
Exterior, woods, day. A number of police cars parked in a clearing, the jumping off place for a search party. Cooper, Truman, Hawk, and Doc Hayward. They're preparing to go off into the woods when Andy speeds up in his patrol car and gets out.
Sheriff, Leo Johnson's been gone for 2 days. His wife hasn't seen him.
Okay, Andy.
But the thing is, I looked into the kitchen. She was having breakfast, and the table was set for 2.
Good work, Andy. You keep those eyes peeled. Andy beams with pride.
Andy, I want you to stay with the cars.
Andy's disappointed.
I need someone to stay near the radio. We'll keep in touch on the walkies.
Andy nods and starts back to the cars.
Hawk, lead the way.
Hawk tunes up his sensory apparatus, nods, starts into the woods. Cooper and Truman look at each other. Cooper nods.
Doc, you sure you're up for this?
In for a penny, in for a pound, Harry.
That's the spirit.
They follow Hawk into the woods.
I find it interesting that Andy actually observed more things than you expect him to. Do you know what I mean? Like he said, but the thing is, I looked into the kitchen and she was having breakfast at the table was set for 2.
Yeah. That was good.
You know what I mean? Like Andy Cooper says, good work, Andy. You keep those eyes peeled. And Andy beams with pride. It's like he's trying to impress Cooper. You know what I mean? Like it was, but it was un-Andy-like. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
After the gun thing, he has to.
Yeah.
After him was shooting someone.
That's true.
And this scene kind of explains why wasn't Andy in the woods. Usually all the men kind of go in the woods together. At least Andy was in season 3 in the woods. This would have explained, Truman wanted him to stay behind.
Yeah.
But, I mean, we didn't need it. But.
No.
I also find it funny that when Truman asks Doc, are you up for this? And he goes, in for a penny, in for a pound, Harry. It was just like, it sounds like something Warren Frost would say, like not hit Doc Hayward. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Right. So I'm thinking about season 3 again, and I'm like, why did Andy go through the whole trouble of saying he was going to meet somebody, and there was the whole truck thing, and he looks at his watch, and the guy never shows up? Like, what was the point?
It was a MacGuffin, Ben. It was a MacGuffin.
I know, but these are things that haunt me. These are things that
haunt you.
They're like, why? What was happening?
The Andy subplot.
Yeah.
We need an Andy spinoff.
What does he do on a regular day? You know,
Nothing.
Yeah.
He picks out a chair with Lucy.
They do find Jacques' cabin, and I guess this is some more stuff related to Cooper's dream.
This brings the dream to life.
Yes. I guess you're right. I guess it really does.
Yeah, it interprets the dream with the bird, the music, and the curtain.
Brian's right.
Bam.
Right, the bird. The bird I don't think about, but the bird actually. There's a shadow of a bird in the dream, in Cooper's dream,
and we have Waldo. And
there's always music in the air,
and the record player is going, and then the curtain.
So again, I'm trying to follow through the episode using this Twin Peaks FAQ, and they mention a detail here that I'm trying to remember. It says there's also a camera on a tripod loaded with film.
Right,
there is.
Okay, so just a real quick note on that. You know, this is also what I noticed in this episode was how much it was really emphasizing some of the detective noir moment. And one of those with that is what that's really referring to is, in my mind, it is going back to Raymond Chandler's novel and the film with Lauren Bacall and Humphrey Bogart, The Big Sleep. And when he comes to find one of the characters, I forget how it's arranged, he walks into the house and the two people have fled and the girl's kind of sitting there out of it. And there's a tripod standing there. And the insinuation is she has this secret life that he's helping her from. And so I think that tripod and camera may have been kind of a throwback, even though we lose that detail in further renditions of what happens that night. And then an interesting part of that is so this is the second movie that Lauren Bacall and Humphrey Bogart would film together. And of course, we know they had a famous affair. And when he first met her, she was 19 and he's 45. Wow. And at the beginning of this episode, you have the detective Cooper asking Audrey point blank, how old are you? 18. I'll see you later, Audrey. So you almost still have this detective noir kind of thing, associations going on. And if that detail's there, which I think that's what it's referencing.
I would like to know how Rob stole all of my exact same thoughts right there. I'm literally going to say that.
I heard it from your log.
I heard it from your log.
That's awesome.
Question, in Cooper's dream, there's a bird.
Yes.
Is that the shadow that goes by? Because I always, the shadow that looks like it's flying by?
Yeah.
That's right.
It's a bird.
Is there always, but I also thought there's a page that goes, there's a piece of paper that is behind the curtain too, correct?
I don't know anything about a piece of paper unless the bird was made out of a piece of paper.
I think it was like the missing diary page goes flying behind, because if you see, there's two distinct flying shadows behind there.
I've never seen a bird one.
Yeah. I don't know if it's Lynch on Lynch that is
remember,
where we
I thought there's two distinct different shadows.
I'm not aware of that.
No.
Yeah, I don't have the detail here, and I'm not remembering that. But I love the interpretation of it.
The Lynch on Lynch book, I think Lynch actually says that he wanted a bird in the background, and they had to come up with
a shadow
of that.
Yeah.
Because I thought it was an owl. Like it looks like an owl, but I also thought it was.
It just shadow of a bird, but it would explain the bird inside the cabin because there was a bird.
The minor bird.
Right.
Of course, the camera is for Flesh World. That's where they took their pictures.
I want to bring something up, and maybe this is something I'm missing, but they see Leo's truck in the photo, but that's the only thing in the photo. There isn't a girl or anything in front of that truck. So it's like they're soliciting people who want to go on a date with this truck, or is the truck trying to impress people? This seems weird. This is a magazine that is soliciting.
I think it was so sleazy, so weird.
Well, it's a world of truckers.
Yeah, it is a world.
I love it.
Touche.
So good.
That's good. Flash World. It's a world of truckers, and it is weird.
That's good.
Like some girls didn't see that truck, and be like, "Well, I'm going," or some guy maybe. I don't know. It's just weird that it's just a picture of the truck.
I mean, it could have been like he could pick anybody up along the way. Like he's not just where he is. He's always moving and grooving.
Yes.
I don't know.
Maybe it's trucker's favorite magazine that they.
It's a shaggin' wagon.
No,
that's his truck.
Where are you going now? I don't know what you're talking about.
I don't know either.
You know what? I just to go back to the bird thing. I don't think that's a bird that's flying behind the shadow.
Wow. I wish I had Lynch on Lynch.
It has no wings. It would have a wingspan. You would see wings flapping. You don't see wings. You just see it looks like a sideways
bird
rectangle going behind the curtain. Just
I wish Lynch on Lynch was available digitally, because I would look it up right now and say, no, this is what Lynch says. Blah, 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 blah.
I'm actually kicking myself Because I have a book next to me, but it's not Lynch on Lynch, and I don't want to run in the other room to grab it right now.
No, don't run to grab. That's just my 2 cents, and it will probably be debunked. But I'm just saying, just from looking at it right now, again, it does not look to me. It doesn't look like a bird.
Wow.
In almost the 30 years of Twin Peaks, I've never heard Laura Palmer's diary floating in the Red Room, but I like it, JC. I like it. I think it's an interesting theory.
Yeah. The thing about Waldo, I gotta go. Just going back to Jacques' cabin and how they find Waldo and how they left him by himself. Poor Waldo, and meets his untimely end in the next one. But the mimicking, I think, is very interesting too, because if you listen to the voice, it does sound like Laura's voice as a bird. You know what I mean? I don't know if was it ever decided it was Cheryl Lee that was doing the Waldo voice, or was it actually the bird?
I don't know.
I mean, to make the bird do it on command, I mean, birds can mimic very well. But to make it do that, I'm sure it was just her recorded, and they just
and they sped it up.
Note to self: if I ever talk to Cheryl Lee, did you do the voice of Waldo?
Yeah, right.
Well, I'm just saying because the way Laura,
I agree.
Laura,
I agree.
It sounds like Cheryl Lee.
It does.
It does.
It totally does. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Leo, no.
Yeah,
Leo, no.
Hurting me.
Hurting me. That's the creepiest one. If I walked into a house and a bird ever said hurting me, I'm walking right out of that house. Goodbye.
So I guess we have the last unseen Twin Peaks.
Interior, banquet room entrance, night. Major Briggs and Einar Thorson. The officer chats up the head Icelander while they graze from the buffet.
Of course, the modern age has changed forever the way your people live, Mr. Thorson. But my guess would be that there still remains a tremendous vestigial interest in the legends and folklore of ancient Iceland.
Einar smiles, doesn't have a clue. Vestigial. Absolutely.
I know, speaking for myself, that I find these last remnants of a connection to a natural, more primitive, almost pagan way of life endlessly fascinating. Locally, for instance, we have the Sasquatch mythos, or Bigfoot, a large, evil-smelling forest dweller, which I suppose would correspond to your Hulder folk, or hidden people.
Trolls?
Exactly. I also happen to be a firm believer in the UFO. I've seen some high-level classified data that would curl your hair.
Josie Packard enters the room, looks around, a little lonely and out of place. She moves to Pete, who's piling up a massive plate of food at the buffet.
Hello, Pete.
Hey, Josie. Quite a spread they laid out. Grab yourself some grub. She takes a plate, looking around.
So these are the Icemen?
Something like that.
I could have stayed.
Yeah.
That's the best, I think, of the three. My favorite.
The Major Briggs parts, it almost feels a little out of character for him to be that forthcoming. I don't know if anybody will agree with that sentiment or not, but he just doesn't seem like a man that would say that much without it being to another person with similar clearance or for a very defined purpose. So that I was kind of okay with that scene being cut just for that reason alone.
That's a good point.
Rob?
Right. I agree with that. I think that maybe that's the way it would have been read. I know that where I stand at today, I'm reading The Secret History. I'm beginning to read the early ideas that Mark Frost
had say the same thing
about wanting to exploit that area, and the comedy that I get out of it is that he's talking to this guy that doesn't understand him, and he can just be free, and he's just telling this guy all the details he can't tell anyone else, and the guy's just taking in like he understands it. But we're getting those first hints. I feel like I'm reading The Secret History here.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
the first two, monologues, I think would have been all right. Getting into I also happen to be a firm believer in the UFO. I think if they cut that but left the beginning part, it does sound like, because when he's talking to Bobby, down the line, and he has that scene with Bobby, and he says a lot. It's the same type of tone. He's telling him things that he thinks and just wants him to listen, and this guy is just listening and kind of going I not knowing that what he's saying, but just kind of trying to be kind and nod his head kind of thing.
And Major Briggs is drinking, so maybe he had a few too many, and he's
loose lips.
Letting loose there.
Yeah.
And this is really his first time he would have talked about the UFOs, at least on the show, if it had aired.
Right.
And it becomes a major storyline in season 2. So it's interesting that Mark Frost, all along thought that he'd fit good with
planting the
seeds of UFO.
Yeah.
How much more powerful was it, though, for Cooper to be on the other end of Briggs opening up? Yes, I prefer the televised version because there's just a strength to that scene with Cooper being the first person to hear Briggs divulge this kind of information that we really want. And I do agree that we can perceive that deleted scene as Briggs feeling free because the other end of the conversation didn't quite understand him. But I just go back to that power at the beginning of season 2 when Briggs is like, "Hey, Cooper, we need to talk."
Would have lessened it, right?
Right.
Yeah, I think it would have. Yeah, I think that's right.
And then you have Leland. He's dancing.
He's got his dance scene.
The Leland Shuffle.
And this scene could be interpreted as there's music in the air, and there's dancing, and the little man dances.
His performance, like he actually kind of almost squats down at one point when he's dancing.
Yeah,
and
he
almost
does.
like he's kind of shrinking like a little man.
We talked about all of Cooper's dream clues being materialized in previous scenes. This is the culmination of that, and it's the secretive one. It's the one that's in plain sight. It's saying, hey, Leland's somebody to watch, but we didn't know we should be watching him. Right. And again, that strength of writing right there. They were telling us to watch Leland, and we just didn't see it right before our noses.
Right. And you don't want to believe a father grieving the loss of his daughter would be the one. In a million years, you don't want to think that.
Right.
Yeah, it's the polar opposite of the man from another place. The man from another place, when he's dancing, he's like jamming and he's having a good time, and Leland's the polar opposite. So almost like the doppelganger. He's the sad one, crouching down and dancing and mourning, and then the man from another place is the happy little guy dancing inside. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
right.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
On a side note, how many of us have danced like that at parties?
Only in my dreams.
I should next party I go to.
Hawk never would. No.
Yeah.
I don't care what any of you say. You hear "Dance of a Dream Man" come on, and you're gonna dance because that song.
Right.
Just,
well, part of the dance,
song.
the part that kind of hits me with it is that what it reminded me just in thought, and maybe it's just connecting too many of the dances. I thought, here's the thing: you're feeling this empathy for Leland, and then Catherine's idea is she'll start doing this funny dance, and then it catches on, and it becomes a craze. Everyone starts mimicking it, and then that made me think Fire Walk with Me with that where Bobby's being cross with Laura, and she gives him that smile, and then he melts and he begins to do this kind of funky swagger or dance, and then everyone around him's mimicking Bobby, or reality's off kilter. It's almost like this is unrealistic that fast everyone would start mimicking.
I've got a real indication of a laugh coming on. That's scene, right? Where she says, "Come on, Bobby, smile," and then he goes and he's like, and then everybody around him, he goes through the doors. Is that the scene you're talking about?
Yeah.
That's the scene, yeah. And I think there's no connection, but it's what it reminded me of. Just that everyone in the room's dancing out of character. It's just
it gets bizarre. It's almost it just kind of pulls into like everyone kind of adjusts to Bobby's frequency for a second, kind of.
Right. Yeah. And in this scene, you have Audrey who's like crying and watching all this. I mean, I always interpret it as she's crying because she knows the pain that Leland's actually going through, and like how this is horrible that they're like almost making fun of him. Or she could just be she just saw her dad having an affair. But
yeah,
I kind of look at it as she's crying for Leland.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both.
It humanizes Audrey in the same way we spoke of earlier with Bobby and James. She is a child at the end of the day. Yeah, she's 18, but seeing her father, it caught up in what she sees him in, it's devastating. It's hard, and we want to view her as an adult because she's a main character in the show, and she's injecting herself in scenes with Cooper where she's trying to be somewhat flirty and seductive, but at the end of the day, she's 18, and that was tough for her to see.
Yeah.
Yep.
Except for the last scene.
We'll get there.
We're getting there.
Also, a scene with Ben Horn and Josie, and they're plotting and planning. But this is the strongest I've ever seen Josie, and she never really gets to be this. She seems very tough, like she can take on Ben, and I don't know.
But it's double crossing. Ben's double crossing her, and
I wish we saw more of this version of her throughout the whole series. I feel like I don't know. I feel like she wasn't as strong as this scene ever again.
I think she was smarter than what we put. I think she was supposed to be portrayed as this very innocent, like Andrew brought her over.
Yeah.
Not our Andrew, the Andrew in the show.
Andrew
brought her over, and made her his wife and the whole thing. But I think she knew who she was marrying and what it was going to entitle. And I think you wanted to believe that she was this, in love with Harry, woman who couldn't speak very good English. But I think at the end of the day she was a little bit more, sinister than we want to give her credit for. And I think this scene shows that.
Yeah.
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 Funny side note, I watched Twin Peaks with my parents when it originally aired, and my dad was convinced that Josie was the killer pretty much from, I don't remember how early on, but very early in season 1 all the way up until the revelation.
Wow.
Wow.
And she did shoot Cooper, so, I mean, she wasn't that innocent.
Yeah.
That's right.
Nice. Leland comes home and gets beat up by Hank, and then...
You mean Leland?
Leo gets beat up by Hank outside.
Shelly shoots him, yeah.
Right. And Hank is like, now that he's a dishwasher and he's trying to win the affection back of Norma, he's like, I'm going to go beat someone up because of the whole money thing. And then he comes in, he's beaten up, and he's like, now I'm going to take out my aggravation on Shelly. But Shelly has the gun. And we hear the gunshot and the lamp kind of shake.
I hate his side. He goes, oh, that like grunt. Oh my God. To this day, I'm like, oh. Shelly starts screaming, but it's how he screams. It's like this very like primal. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, you got me.
Oh.
We were talking about how this is titled Cooper's Dream, that we didn't fully understand it. We couldn't have called this like Leo's Very Bad Day.
Yeah.
Leo in a very, very, very bad day.
That's right.
And then we got the scene that is always a sticking point for...
What do you mean sticking point?
Well, I mean, it's like a scene that I totally am happy it didn't pan out.
I think JC and I like this.
Yeah, but this scene defines Cooper, what he is going to do with a naked 18-year-old in his bed. It defines him until now. I honestly believe if Cooper in the following episode hopped in bed with her, we would not be talking about this show. It would no. Cooper would not be. Cooper would not be the character we all love, because you're an FBI agent and you're sleeping with an 18-year-old. Like, he would be scum of the earth. He would be #MeToo right now. I mean, it would not fly in 2018, 2019. I'm happy they didn't go in that direction.
I don't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole because I just I don't necessarily agree, but I don't disagree. I don't care that he didn't sleep with her, but I think in terms of where we are as a culture, would we view the show? Would a lot of people view the show differently, and would we be inundated with articles about things like this? Yes.
Yeah.
But they get on my nerves personally, yes, they would. But I know that's an unpopular sentiment, so I'll just leave it at that.
In context of this episode, when it was made, it was a very different culture.
I think you did the right thing.
Right. So, I mean, back then, if they were to sleep together, it would have been fine. There would not have been an outrage. I totally agree. We always have to look at things in context of when things were made. And that's I agree 100%. It would not have been a big deal. I'm just saying maybe younger people watching it now, it would have been a big... And you're right, there would have been a lot more chatter about that scene.
I agree with Brian to a point. If they had let the scene play out, they would have turned it around and had Cooper wake up, and it would have been a dream.
I like that.
That's what I'm saying. I'm saying that because he does say what I need and what I want, which this is the big scene that alludes to season 3.
Right.
And how he is as his doppelganger and what he was as a person when we knew him in season 1 and season 2. But when he says that, if they had let him play on that, if he had set that scene up and said there's a difference between what I need and what I want, and then they went forward with the scene the way that everybody's played it out in their head in every fanfic I know across the land. the next thing you would see is him waking up.
That could work.
Yeah, that definitely could have worked.
You know what I'm saying? So they could have gotten their scene where everybody would have had the scene of all scenes, and then they would have also had kept his innocence That's my point.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I talked about some of those noir elements, and the kind of person that we had that nuance of her crying. We're starting to see who she really is, and if she was just kind of, at least in a noir perspective, detective noir kind of hard-boiled detective kind of thinking, if she continued to be that kind of sly, the powerful person she was, getting her job at the perfume counter, and she's also a temptress of Cooper or somehow, then they're always the ones in the story that shoot the protagonist at some point. They're the dangerous seductress in that old style of writing. And so I agree with JC 100%. I would have loved to have seen it played out as a dream to some degree, but it also might have set Audrey down a path that they didn't really want to go toward quite. I'm not sure about that, but at least that's the way I'm kind of reading it.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. I mean, this scene is widely talked about between me and Ben all the time.
I think in terms of character development, they did the right thing for both Audrey and Cooper. I echo a lot of sentiments about Cooper's part in it that it probably just didn't really jive with his character for him to have a sexual relationship with an 18-year-old woman, or really any woman, period, at that point in the investigation.
Right.
It wouldn't have felt right. For Audrey, it opened up future possibilities. But what I'm really fixated on, just sitting here listening to everybody speak, is the duality of it all and how our Cooper saved her innocence. He did not take advantage of a girl who was already upset and went to him because she was upset.
Yeah.
And then what happened to her in between seasons 2 and seasons 3 with the Doppelcooper.
Right. So maybe I should save a little of this conversation for your next community rewatch, but this is going to lead to a conversation between him and her that's going to set up a talk about needs and desires. And that's going to become important for the return when we see a side of character that this establishes the Cooper we have now. And then we're going to see the Cooper that was in there. And I think that makes this scene that much better to me, the way that they chose to go with it.
Yeah, I agree.
Right.
And I think we've already touched on this, but I'll say what I've said many times before. 15-year-old version of me loved the idea, like, oh, Cooper and Audrey together. And I thought it was so sweet. Now being, an adult, having 3 children, 2 girls, and not, I think it's, very inappropriate. It's even more inappropriate when you take into season 3 and you realize Mr. C raped her. We call this rape as well when there's a child or a young person to be put in this situation. You know what I don't like thinking about sometimes, but I'm sure this is always a theory that, like, is Mr. C really Cooper and stuff? Is it a part of Cooper, and, like, is Cooper a really bad person? He has a bad side.
Yeah.
No, he is not a bad person.
He can do no wrong.
In all seriousness, everybody's like that. Like, everybody, there's always a bad side and a good side to everybody, and it's whether or not you act on certain things that are within you.
Right.
So it's like, we could all be Mr. C. Well, not Mr. C, but we could all have a Bob, that's within us that makes us the most primal and act a certain way. But we choose to, like, find our fireman, so to speak, if you're gonna use the 2 sides of good and evil.
Yeah.
And,
I like that.
Yeah, Cooper.
Our Senorita Dido. So
yes.
Is there any other comments? Anything else about this episode?
So just to close in, I made a point earlier, and then I never got back to it. Although I touched on it, I missed my opportunity. This was when we talked about that deleted scene with Briggs and the secret history, and in that, does not Mark Frost talk about Margaret's husband dying in a fire in the forest right after their marriage? And that's where I kind of said, well, no thanks to Mark Frost as far as her not interpreting this log having a significance with her husband. I feel like that Mark Frost was heading that direction a little bit with her husband, and we've all heard him. We've associated her husband with the fireman. We've associated him with the log. The fireman, maybe even more so, because he mentioned giants in the woods and then this man dying in a fire. And that was the name they used for him. So I just wanted to mention that just to close out the point and get back around to it. I probably associate him more with the log than I do the fireman or the giant. But I know that as fans, we've all talked about it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree.
Each one of you let me know what you guys are working on at 25 Years Later site, and we'll start with Rob.
Yeah, so by the time this episode comes out, it'll be out. I just finished an interview with Andreas Halskov on his TV Peaks book, and it's an excellent interview. He gives thorough answers in there, so if you haven't read it by the time you hear this, please go back and see what he has to say. And then we have our Celebration of Women, which I think everyone's going to talk about, and I will be writing about Janie E. So.
Oh, nice.
So
nice.
cool.
And Steve?
I right now, gosh, Andrew, how much am I behind on right now? 20 things?
So we're gonna need to talk after this is over.
You're gonna have to go to the principal's office. The principal's office.
Oh, damn it. Okay. All right. Well, okay. Good. Okay. Good to know. I'm working on also Celebration of Women articles. I'm doing just a kind of, I don't like best rankings, but my 10 kind of personal favorite women in horror filmmakers. Something that needs to be talked about, because I also think that women have made by far the most exciting stuff in the genre for the past 10 years. And on top of that, just apparently about to get yelled at by Andrew. So that'll be
Andrew?
Yep. So July is the Celebration of Women. Really the exciting stuff that we'll talk about here that will kind of be a scoop at the end of July is that this is right around the time when Rob and I will begin our discussions for Twin Peaks month year 2, which will be February of 2020. Ooh. Rob and I will be working out all of the details for the fun and exciting things that we want to do next February.
Cool.
And the other exciting scoop that I can give is that I am actively working with a handful of members of the 25 Years Later team on some pretty big Lost-related projects, which will start in September.
Wow,
that's awesome.
Nice,
very cool.
And that'll be the 10th anniversary, right?
The 15th anniversary of the pilot, and our projects will end around the 10-year anniversary of the show ending next year.
Yeah, they got the big celebration in Hawaii next year.
Wow.
We've got some pretty cool stuff in motion right now, and still a little bit of time to plan more, but let's just say that the writers are doing their Lost rewatches as we speak.
Awesome. And I you know, we've spoken to Andrew. I really want John Bernardi to do something on Lost, because I think he's never seen the show, and I think it'd be really interesting to see his theories on it.
Yeah.
I have tried. John's plate is pretty full for the rest of this year. Something about 25 Years Later is most of the staff knows what they're doing for the rest of the year. Like, I could tell you what my plans are for November right now.
That's crazy.
And John was pretty locked down with other stuff. He does want to get to Lost at some point in time, but as of right now, he is not a part of these projects. So, which is kind of a bummer, but John has a lot of other cool works in the stuff up his sleeve, I guess I should say.
Yeah.
Cool.
And JC?
I'm working on an article that will come out, well, already be out when this episode airs. It's an article for Celebration Women on Marilyn Monroe, and how I think she's a comic genius and was underestimated completely during her career. And awesome. I'm also we're doing a project called The Summer of '69, and I'll be writing about Judy Garland for that.
Oh,
nice.
Cool.
Nice.
Very nice.
Yes, and along some other things, so we're trying to get some news, up and coming news stuff. You know, every day we're trying to add a little something, but got a little bit behind. But we'll be coming back bigger and stronger with a lot of news items as well.
Well, keep it up. I get my news from you guys.
Yeah.
I think I learned about Ghostbusters movie from 25 Years Later site. So keep up the news.
Yeah,
that's true.
Can we give you another scoop?
Yes, please do.
Steve, do you think we should give him a scoop?
Give him a scoop.
Give me a scoop.
I want scoops.
So,
Give me 2 scoops.
Steve's one of the editors for our horror department, and something that Steve, Valerie, Laura, and I are working on behind the scenes for horror is a huge celebration for the month of October. There are a lot of people, horror fans, Halloween fans, that think Halloween should last more than one day. It is their favorite holiday, and we tend to agree. So look for the month of October to be filled with all kinds of horror madness, both written articles and some other things that we can't really tease too much right now, but let's just say we're going big in October.
Wow.
Oh, exciting.
Very exciting.
That's awesome.
Bro, it's exciting times.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm really excited. It's great. I mean, Steve, this is the first time we've gotten to talk to you, and it's really been great to have you on the show.
I'm so happy you guys had me. Thank you.
Yeah. And I'm really looking
Steve's
forward
the best.
to
Yes, Steve is one of my excellent news guys that helps me out big time. So a lot of it is definitely Steve.
Oh,
Steve writing his
she's
little heart
being
out.
kind. She has to fix all my work.
Steve, a little bit more credit here since he's the person least known by the audience, perhaps just from not being on the show before. Steve and a writer named Will are going to be two writers that surpass me this year in terms of written content. The first 2 years, I had written the most articles each year compared to all the other writers, and Steve and Will are going to destroy me this year.
Wow.
Do you know why that is? If I could add why that is, it's because Will and I firmly believe in quantity over quality, whereas quality over quantity for some weird reason.
That's our motto, though, too. We're close to 200 episodes, so it's all about quantity,
wow.
not about quality.
Yeah.
The only time we get quality is when you guys are on the show.
Yep.
So, I mean...
Oh, too kind.
Well, thank you
guys
so
are
much.
great.
And mention how can we check out your articles and how can we follow you?
Best way on Facebook, we have our Facebook page, 25 Years Later. Twitter, it's 25YL site. I believe that's also the Instagram handle. We all have our own individual social media. I'm at Andrew Grevas on Twitter. I'll let everybody else plug themselves. But the big thing is to come to the website itself, 25yearslatersite.com, and sign up for the emails the way that Ben alluded to earlier.
I do. I love getting them every day. I get info, and that's how I learned about the Freddy Krueger series. It's like, oh, I gotta go to the site and read this stuff.
Yeah, good stuff.
That's been a lot of fun, which reminds me of more work that I'm behind on that Andrew can yell at me. It's been a lot of fun.
But see, then when we have more content for October, then right? I mean, if you're behind, you'll have it for October.
Yeah, sure. Andrew's like, no, it's coming. It's supposed to. But seriously, it's been that series was a real, just a big learning experience for me on the editing side of things, and it was just a blast reading. Like Rob's article was so good, Anthony's article was so good. Like everybody's stuff was really good, and it really kind of made me hone in and just try much harder. So it was really awesome.
Cool. And Steve, how can people follow you?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, if you let me keep talking, I'll never shut up. I have, let's see, my Facebook, it's just Steve Wandling. I'm on Twitter, Steve Wandling. I think it's a Jeremiah of Alaska, which I think when I made a Twitter, which was only like a year ago, I didn't know you couldn't change that. I can't figure out how to change that, and I don't really like it, but that's what it is. I'm on there a lot, but I interact with the 25YL mostly when I'm there. So if you kind of see them, you'll find me pretty easy. And I am also I'd like to plug that I'm the co-host of a podcast called Repo Nerds, and you can it's through Blog Talk Radio, I think. If you go to www.archivist, it's on Blog Talk Radio. It's Archivist Bet on Sexy Witches. And I am a featured, that is from the Geek Girl perspective, I'm like a featured panelist on that, and I am the co-host of the sister show Repo Nerds. So check that out.
Awesome.
Cool. And Rob?
Right, yeah. So maybe the best way to find all of us, if you go to our 25 Years Later site, under the menu, you will see the team, and you can scroll down and find our information. You'll find my email there. If you have any ideas for Twin Peaks, please email me, email Andrew, and we will sure get that. And then if you wanted to follow me on Twitter, that's at Rob Ed, as in Big Ed King, Rob Ed King, all together.
And JC?
You can follow me on Twitter. I'm AC Hotch 726. You could also follow the Bookhouse Babes. It's at Bookhouse Babes on Twitter as well. We're still trying to spread the word of Twin Peaks. Me.
Cool. Thanks so
and
much.
At 25 Years Later site.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
So much fun.
Thank you, 25 Years Later site, and thank you to the Unseen Players, the Pink Room Burlesque. You guys are fantastic as always, and it's always great to have you on the show.
And if you like to comment, give us a question, or talk about what we just talked about tonight, send us an email at twinpeaksunwrapped@gmail.com. go ahead and like us on the old Facebook. Facebook is just blowing up. I mean, we've surpassed our last goal for likes. I'll have to come up with another goal because we're just flying. Also, follow us on Twitter at Twin Peaks Unwrapped. Feel free to give us that 5-star review on iTunes. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Check us out on Google Play. We're on Spotify. So while you're playing video games, you can listen to us in the background. Also, support us on TeePublic. All the links are in the show notes. So feel free to click away.
Lucy here on the Twin Peaks Beat. Laura's father won't get rid of his headache by dancing around the problem, but he's not the only one with headaches.
Are you quite finished?
Cousin Madeline finds a clue in Laura's bedroom, but Agent Cooper's too busy looking under the bed to notice what's in it. Look in the bed, Agent. Oops, he saw it.
Don't make me leave.
At least Audrey doesn't have a headache. You'll love Twin Peaks tonight. It's where the elite meet.